In my travels recently, I came across a place that's kind of hard to describe. Industrial salvage, maybe? Call it mantiques. It's sort of the stuff that's just too cool to take to the scrapyard, which is kind of my style. Naturally, I spent a while picking through things and found some treasures. Figured this was a good opportunity for me to talk about the sort of things that I pick when these opportunities arise. I hope that this doesn't come across as trying to brag about my score, because I enjoy when other people do these sort of videos because I learn about some of the more obscure tools, so when I see them out in the wild, I can decide if I want them or not. One of the things I'll always look for is materials, because it's kind of hard to do any project without material. I saw this piece of 2.5-inch steel and I knew I was a little bit short on that size. Obviously, when you get something like this, you end up with mystery steel. You have no idea what the alloy is. But let's at least spark test it and see what happens. The sparks on that are pretty plain and boring, so probably just mild steel. For comparison, here's a piece of hot rolled mild steel. And this one's a piece of 4140. You can see the sparks are a lot brighter and have sort of that little sparkler effect at the end. But even a piece of mild steel this size is going to be useful somehow. I also found a box of various bits of very dirty plastic. I'm going to clean these up a little bit. Well, that at least got the leaves and soil off it. I've definitely got a couple of different materials here. And I've got this sort of translucent amber one. I don't know what that is. Maybe one of you can tell me. I've got some pieces of rubber with holes in them. Those will probably make good motor mounts for the Jeep. The rest of this, I can tell there's a couple different things just based on density. Some of these are... That one's a lot heavier. I'm going to go ahead and do the thing that hardly anybody does and talk about what I paid for this. This was all sort of one of those bundle deals, so I'm going to kind of break it down the way it is in my head. That piece of steel, I'll say I paid 10 bucks for. Same on the assortment of plastic, about 10 bucks. Alright, because I'm a nerd, I went ahead and measured and weighed everything and worked out the density. And what I've come up with is this pile is about 1.4 grams per cubic centimeter, which means that this is POM or acetyl or Delrin. Same thing, different names. That's probably the most popular machining plastic. This stuff is a little lighter, about 1.1 grams per cubic centimeter. So that stuff is probably nylon 6. I'm kind of basing this off of matching the density to common machining or engineering plastics. This stuff is a lot heavier, about 2.2 grams per cubic centimeter. It's probably PTFE, Teflon. And then this one is much lighter. This is right around 1 gram per cubic centimeter. That one's a little tougher. Might be ABS. I don't really know. And those I didn't measure because they're a weird shape. That whole exercise was a little bit silly because I don't do a whole lot that's going to require a specific plastic, but it does give me a good idea in case I want something with specific properties. Next up, I picked up this handle. Since I do a lot of repairing and making tools, having handles, hand wheels, that sort of thing in my stash is pretty handy. I was thinking this one would look good on my shaper, but the square is a little too big for it. It does fit on my Ampo grip vise, which I didn't have a handle for. Since I know you're going to ask about this, the very first video I ever posted on YouTube was about this, so you can go back and watch that. Most of the stuff I get is stuff that I know that I'm going to use. I saw these dual bandsaw guides for different size blades. And I don't have a dual bandsaw, but I know Mark from Rotary SMP recently did a video where he made some of these out of old brake rotors, which is something I totally support doing. But it's also nice to have the proper original parts. So I picked these up thinking of him. Also has these little guides, which I guess are for setting different thickness saw blades. So I'm going to ship these off to Austria for him. Let's say I paid 5 bucks for these, so not a big deal. I'm glad he can use them, because otherwise I would have to go pull a bandsaw out of a swamp and restore it. I guess my point with this is, if you're out, find a stash of tools, think about your friends, deserving YouTubers, especially if you come across any Brown & Sharpe 9 taper tooling. One of the other things I'll usually grab is something that I haven't seen before. And this drill chuck caught my eye, not because it's a keyless chuck, but because it's a 4-jaw drill chuck. instead of a 3. I was thinking it was so you could put a tap in there. Well, I guess you could. I don't know that it holds it all that straight. I might try it in the lathe like that, but this thing's actually even cooler than that. This thing is a Wallstrom chuck, and actually let me just show you what it does. Got my adapter sleeve on there. If I grab the nose of the chuck, you can see the jaws come out, and this knurled part will move freely, and if I pull down on that, it retracts the jaws. So what that means is you can change drill bits on the fly with it. That's a pretty cool trick, but it also seems a little bit sketchy, you know, holding a drill bit, trying to get that in there. I think maybe using a magnet's the way to go. It's a pretty cool trick. I don't know how much I'll actually use it. It seems like it could use a good cleaning and lubrication, so I think that's a good excuse to take it apart and see how this thing works. Ah, it unscrews. Ah, there's a little planetary gear set in there. That's cool. Yeah, I could use some lube. That one's locked up. So these pins go into that collar there. So when you pull down on this, you're stopping the rotation of this and pushing these gears down. And there's little dogs here that then hit that and will spin that back off. That's pretty cool. And then when you grab this, it obviously just tightens that up. I don't think I'm going to try to get the jaws out. Really the only thing that needs a little attention is these are really sticky. And mostly just that one. So, like I said, this thing looked interesting. I'd never seen one before, so I grabbed it. I don't know how much I'll use it, but I'm glad I have it. These little spring-loaded bits are kind of clamping onto that shaft, trying to keep the end of the chuck centered. It's kind of neat. It's definitely smoother. While I've got the Scotch-Brite out, let me move these end mills first. Oh yeah, end mills. A lot of times if you're bundling things, you can pick these up pretty cheap. Some of these are good ones. That's a Niagara. Some of them are Chinese. But I think it worked out that I was between $2 and $3 a piece on these. Some of them are resharpened, but you know, they still have the wax on them. And at this price, I can't even get my old end mills resharpened for this. That one's got a 60,000th radius on it. There are times when having a radius on the end of that leaves a nice fillet on whatever you're working on, so that's handy. This cast iron surface plate is probably the big purchase. I'm gonna say I paid $100 for it. The humidity's been getting to it. At some point I'll go back and check this off my granite surface plate, re-scrape it as needed. This is one of those things I've kind of wanted to get for a while. It's a Challenge Machinery Company plate, 12 by 18. It'll come in pretty handy when, not if, I get around to rebuilding my milling machine. Say I'm working on the knee, I can carry it over, drop the whole thing on it, and get basically the entire plane of the knee or most of the column without having to cross-check things. Nice stout webbing on the bottom. 3 points of contact so I won't warp sitting on a workbench. That'll still need a little bit more love, but it's looking better. It's going to be a nice addition to the shop. And that leaves kind of the last thing that I look for when I'm out picking, which is, well, rusty, cruddy, junky stuff like this that needs to be fixed. This is a Procunier tapping head, model 3E. I've got this smaller Etco tapping head that one of my Patreon supporters gave me. This one goes up to 5/16 in aluminum or 1/4 inch in steel. And ever since I got this, I wanted to get a bigger one because it's super handy to have. This thing was laying outside. It was locked up, but considering that these things are $200 to $300 on eBay for 15 bucks, I'm going to take a chance on this. Especially because as a YouTube creator, I have this weird incentive to buy the worst, crustiest crap I can and fix it because I can make another video on this, which is what I'm going to do. So if you want to see that, stick around. Anyway, I hope that was informative or at least interesting, and good luck finding tools out there.